Welcome back. The Important Nonsense Podcast. Roster the people. 32 teams in 32 days. Summer edition. We're on to Cincinnati. It's my favorite time. I get to say that every year. I'll never not say it. Mason is appropriately cringing. That is the correct reaction for a joke that dated. I love it. That's why we're here.
I understand why they brought me on the show now. It was a trap to hit me with that. I'm pretty sure I got hit with that one last year too.
Yep.
But anyway, all
you
right.
Gotta,
well, we're here.
You gotta do that joke. Contractually obligated to do that joke.
It's the dog days of summer, so I guess I'll let it slide.
No, that was the Cleveland show. That was the other day.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
I did not realize that Neil's been working on his pun game, you guys. I did not realize that was the game here.
It's all about the drip.
It's all about the dad jokes. You get older, Mason. I'm telling you, it's like it just kicks on. You can't fight nature. The older you get, the closer I approach to 40. The dad joke game. See, that's the thing. Jason's literally going to like vibrate into the sun as he
Why
gets
am I
older.
in the wrong spot?
Oh, here.
You let him overtake my spot?
I'm not paying attention.
Whoa.
like I'm paying attention.
Demoted.
That's crazy.
Here.
That's crazy that
Here.
you would do your co-host like that.
I'll put myself.
Myself personally, Jason, I just want you to know that myself personally, I would never put you in the wing seat. I would never make you third. On my own show, I would never make Vishal third. You hear that, V? I would never do that to you. So here we go.
Just how it goes.
How you been, though, Jason? Oh, I'm good. We had the same.
All right, I'm back. I'm back from the penalty box.
right.
I'm back from the penalty box. All right, let's actually attempt to do the show people tuned in to watch. 32 teams in 32
Something
days.
about a cat that's big and, has stripes, right?
Garfield?
Oh, that works too. It's pretty much right. That's kind of what
I hate Mondays and do love lasagna. Yeah. Much harder do you want to derail? I'm gonna stop preventing the car crashes, Mason. I'm just gonna let them happen.
I'm so sorry to everybody watching this. I apologize for the two of them. I swear we'll get to the brass tacks eventually.
I was gonna. You just can't. You can't say words like that and put it on a tee in front of me. It's like dangling shiny objects. I have more horrible puns, but we do have to move on. 32 teams in 32 days. This is your primer for the 2024 fantasy football season. As always, this is based on 12-team PPR, 16-round draft format, God's format. If you're playing in other formats, no. That's wrong. We're just kidding. That's the best. That's the easiest way to do this.
The Lord format.
You'll hear all of the rankings you'll hear primarily are coming from Fantasy Pros. We will obviously sprinkle in our own rankings, but we're part of their ECR. We're also going to use the Fantasy Pros ADPs. Shout out to Fantasy Pros. We are as always an affiliate with them. We love working with them every year. So with that, today, Cincinnati Bengals. One last PSA. Today is July 25th. Training camp has just started. If anything we say sounds a little bit dated, that's why. Check out the wrap-up show. It'll be, I want to say, the 1st of September is what we're tentatively targeting. And we'll go through a full live stream. We'll update any takes that need to be updated. But for right now, Joe Burrow's new haircut. The thing everybody wants to talk about. Why did Joe Burrow feel the need to make himself look like Slim Shady with less money?
Look, all I know is that Joe could walk into any place in Cincinnati, and it doesn't matter if he has any hair. It doesn't matter if he's even wearing shoes. That's all I have to say about the situation. He's going to come in. He could go in there with any haircut. He's going to drop the touchdowns he's going to drop, and they're going to all call Joe cool, and then we're going to forget about this come October. But it's a slow news day. Do you know how many things I've tapped today just trying to, somebody being like, oh, so-and-so calls out. Oh, one Jordan Poyer says that the Bills thought the Dolphins were gonna fold. What kind of news are we even posting here? And why did you guys bother to ask Mike McDaniel that? Or my favorite one was Mike Tomlin yesterday when they asked him about the snaps for the quarterbacks. Just masterful work. But it's a slow news day. and we'll get past it eventually into the real stuff. This is
It
the
is-
real
it
stuff
is-
right here.
It is very much a slow time because training camp is just getting started. But the good news is Joe Burrow is, it looks like, completely healthy. He's not going to start on the PUP list. It seems like it's wheels up for Joe Burrow. As such, his rankings reflect that. He's opening in the initial ECR ranking, QB7. Should translate to around 59 overall. I still maintain the ECR has been overinflating quarterback for the last couple of years, particularly non-rushing quarterback. Seems like the public agrees with me because his current ADP is 92, which that seems more realistic for someone that's not really going to give you much rushing floor. That being said, I don't really have much of an issue with him being the QB7. I'm not taking him in the 5th round, which is what that would be if you're going by the ECR. But in a normal, non-insane universe where that's not happening, I have no problem with Joe Burrow. Does either of you have any long-term concerns about Joe Burrow? Anything like that?
I'm more curious to see how his wrist, like that's the one thing that I want to see it. I just want to see how he handles it, how he throws. I mean, you've seen some tape, but it's recovery. So
Got very close to doing an emotion that people get sent to the penalty box for. Got very close to it.
I know that I thought about that ahead of time. That's why I was very careful with how I did this. So
Mason, I used to do that on the show years ago, and I've been since told that I'm going to go to the penalty box if I keep doing that when people are talking.
I wonder why.
I don't know. It might be a little disrespectful. I don't know. Theoretically.
Insane, weird how that happens. So, I mean, I'm kind of in the same boat. I think while you have a guy like Joe, he's uber talented. All things going well, he has 2 of the better receivers out there, which we'll get into here in a little bit. And those type of weapons with his skill set can go to the moon. I know that we're talking about QB7, and once you get to a certain point and you're not getting that rushing floor from guys, it's kind of just like, who's your factor, who's your flavor. So, I mean, I personally love Joe Burrow. I would probably price out the quarterback position, though. It's just more of a smarter thing to kind of try to push it off if you can, just a little bit. You're going to get that drop off is a little bit less once you get a little bit further down there. So we'll have to see. But as Jason said, the big questions are kind of his little injuries. They pile up. So sometimes it seems like it's this and it's that, and all of a sudden, so he was dealing with a calf all season, and then it's like it's the wrist that knocks him out of the season, and it's if it's not one thing, it's another thing, and now we're going into, I think this is 3 serious, right? I mean, rather serious
medium
injuries.
Serious, like not nothing.
It's not nothing. So it's one of these things that if this is the approach that you want to go, which I think we'll get into here in a second, where it could possibly become a value to you to add Joe Burrow to your roster. But those are going to be things that bear monitoring moving forward for sure.
Yeah, the injuries feed on each other, as you kind of stated. So it's the calf, so he can't run as well. And then because he can't run as well, he gets slammed and then hurts the wrist. And it's just, it all stems from not being able to move as well. And he's a relatively mobile guy, but he's not one of the Konami code rushing floor quarterbacks, which already caps his upside. So the idea that we're going to talk about taking him in the 5th round, I'm going to pass on that. Obviously, in Dynasty or 2 QB, the rules change. That's totally different. But for the purposes of this conversation, 1 QB redraft league, I'm going to let somebody else have Joe Burrow, and I'm going to be targeting guys further down that are less expensive. That's usually the way I want to do it. Jake Browning is still the backup. What we learned last year is that Jake Browning is actually pretty good. Jake Browning is not Joe Burrow, but Jake Browning can run that offense, and it is fine. It's not great. It's not like he's going to light the world on fire, but he can run the offense, and he won't crater out your skill position investments, which is what we really care about. So
I'm not going to worry about the other fancy assets on this team.
Yeah, you're not going to suddenly be like, oh, Joe Burrow's done, and now Jamar Chase is worthless. No, Jake Browning will go in and get him the ball. It'll be fine. It's all good.
He's Chase Daniel in a nutshell, essentially.
He is younger Chase Daniel.
He's going to be the valuable backup for essentially the rest of his career. He's going to ride those sufficient, I'll say, not excellent, not stellar, but those sufficient snaps that he had this season into a long career effectively backing up a number of different quarterbacks throughout his career, and he'll
Best
do
job
fine.
in pro sports.
And he'll do fine doing it. And when you come in, and that's a nice insurance policy for potentially one of these receivers a little bit further down the board. So
let's talk about running back real quick, because there's one major change with this team, which is that Joe Mixon is no longer on this team. They couldn't afford it anymore, and frankly, that relationship was starting to go sideways anyway. So it's time to move on because it's too much. And that's the other thing about this team is that they're in cap hell, and they're going to be in cap hell. So you're going to start seeing some weird stuff. This team on paper, when I looked at it, I'm like, oh, this reminds me of the Bengals team from a couple years ago, actually, where they same basic core, but they've lost some of the niceties that they've tried to add. So now they've kind of gone backwards on paper a little bit. And one of the ways that manifests is new starting running back is Zach Moss. We've seen Zach Moss for a long time. I've never been a big fan. Some people are. It comes out in the initial Zach Moss ranking. If it was still Joe Mixon, I think he'd be higher because in fact, Joe Mixon on a different team is still higher. So but Zach Moss filled in amicably for Jonathan Taylor. I should say admirably for Jonathan Taylor last year, and he earned himself his contract as a result. But he opens as the RB30, which would translate to about 97 overall, which actually feels about right for me. That's you're in the right neighborhood where I'd be willing to accept that. If you're talking about he's a high-end RB3 effectively, that sounds about right for where I have him in my personal rankings. It's neighborhood of that. I'm a little less bullish than that, but the public is way higher than me. They've got him at 91 overall, which would put him at about like RB27. So they've got him as like a high-end flex, and I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Mason, can Zach Moss be the guy? Can he do it?
Drug addiction is such a strange thing. And as a reformed Zach Moss truther, Neil, I can say
you've been hanging out by Union Station. I told you to stay away.
In it, baby.
I told you to stay away from Union Station. What did I tell you?
I'm right back.
I'm not taking you to Waffle House at 4 a.m. anymore.
I think he can listen with a caveat. Like you said, I think this is a good spot for him, especially when you're fishing for some of these later running backs on your fantasy rosters.
You're going to need him.
That this is a guy, and I know that I'm going to get messages on Twitter that are going to say that I relapsed as a Zach Moss truther. I know that it's going to happen, but I think that the first month of last season showed us that he did earn this contract through 5 weeks. He showed out as the guy. He had 5 yards per carry, 2.9 yards after contact per attempt, 20 broken tackles, and 3rd in rushing yards over that time. So he was supremely effective in that offense that Jonathan Taylor looked very good into at times, and sometimes didn't look quite as good. Sometimes we were questioning like, hey, John, you were out for kind of a bit.
Yeah.
And, we got Zach Moss over here, and he was pretty good. So maybe, pick it up. So I think you just, as weird as that is the thing to say.
That's a weird statement considering where Jonathan Taylor is. We'll cover that in the Colts show, but
I fully relapsed into this point. Yes,
yeah. In fact, Jason, before you go, I actually have a letter here. There we go. I have a letter here for Mason. Mason, your drug addiction has impacted me in the following ways. You have cost me at least 2 fantasy championships. I can no longer continue to support this abusive relationship and behavior. All right, thank you.
We needed it.
I was just happy to have the letter, a random letter actually sitting on my desk because that wasn't planned. That was so. Jason, thoughts on Zach Moss?
I mean, the thing is, we don't know who. This seems like another messy backfield to me. I mean, because they have the guy that's been there in Chase Brown, and then they have Zach Moss, and so a new guy coming in. It's just such a mess. I'd rather just take Chase Brown at the later ADP, but
we didn't even talk about Chase Brown. So if you're going to talk about Chase Brown, you got to introduce Chase Brown. This is a primer for people, Jason. Who's Chase Brown?
I'm coming back. We're okay. Give me a sec. All right. It's just the fact that we don't know. And so at that price, I'm probably out. I mean, I'm still going full Shark Tank here and just saying, not doing it. I'm out on this deal. So, and the risk that's involved, whoever ends up being if there is an actual full-time back, might have value. I mean, if one of the other gets hurt,
Joe Mixon always had value when he was the full-time back. So yeah,
correct.
I mean,
You're looking Zach Moss last year, I think averaged 15 point something fantasy points. Joe Mixon was around that same area, but he also had every carry at 60 or 70% of the carries. If that happens, one of these backs is going to be great. It just, I can't do it, man. I mean, that's a steep cost. I like Zach Moss, but it's not for me.
Never actually got back to setting up who Chase Brown was. I just wanted to let him finish since he told me he was going to get there.
No, I was coming back to Zach Moss. I don't Chase Brown. It's a whole other topic.
Okay,
so.
okay. Well, Chase Brown has been on the team for a couple of years, as Jason alluded to. A lot of people have been fans of Chase Brown in the industry and in the public, hoping that he would be able to take the next step. I've always been dubious that would ever be possible. And if he was going to do it, he would have already done it by now, because Joe Mixon is not exactly a young man. And he's never been able to outkick Joe Mixon. And then they thought so little of Chase Brown, they went and signed Zach Moss. So it's like, what realistically are we discussing here? So,
I mean,
but Chase Brown, because
if we're honest, we're just realizing that the fantasy community is literally just small cults made up of my guy running back rooms. And, people, they're planting the flag in Chase. You had the old people who used to plant the flag in Zach Moss. There's like two
people
or
that would plant the flag in Joe Mixon. Like,
exactly. It's about our little cults of which backs we end up planting in, because it's all shooting.
It's all about, it's not about anything other than just being right. It's just, I need to be right and I need you to be wrong. That's how this works. It's more important than even winning. It's literally like, it's also, I could drag that analogy out into like other areas of life, but we don't have time for me to do that right now. So what we're going to do instead is talk about Chase Brown opens in the initial rankings at RB 39, which would translate to 125 overall. His ADP is 123. It puts him as that's 10th round. So it's that weird netherworld of that's too expensive to be a handcuff, and also too expensive to not get any, to risk not getting anything. So to me, Chase Brown is like, I'm just not interested. I would rather spend up to get Zach Moss if I'm gonna, than take Chase Brown in a backup role in the 10th round. That makes no sense. There's other things available in the 10th round that are much more attractive than Chase Brown with what? I've got him projected for about 33% of the total work. Maybe he gets to 50. If he got to 50, you could justify his current ADP, but he would need to get half the work. And all that would do is drag Zach Moss down to where Chase Brown is, and then they would both be useless. So that's really where it's like, I'm not super interested in either one of these, but given that caveat, I'd rather have Zach Moss, because at least there's upside. There's something I could point to on the screen and be like, okay, here we go. But I will say, Mason, I am also in the Zach Moss recovery. I've got my chip over here. Yeah, I'm just sticking to the program better than you are. I'm working the steps. Like that's what it is. That's why I told you I ain't taking you to Waffle House at 4 o'clock in the morning anymore. When I find you passed out in the gutter, it's not happening.
The other thing about the thing that scares me most about this backfield is kind of like why Jason is also saying like you can kind of just like stay away to some degree, is that we also live in a world where they run a 50-50 and they're both middling backs and they cannibalize each other of whatever mediocre production they were going to get to begin with. And then you're just like wanting to gnaw your own foot off to get out of this handcuff.
That's what I was saying about them doing that. And then it just all it does is drag Zach Moss down.
Yeah.
But now everything's useless.
Yeah.
And it's like, great. Okay. So now everyone's wrong. Everyone's mad. Everyone's just big mad around the world there. So it's like, all right. So yeah, that's the risk you run.
It's something you have to. Yeah, it's something you're gonna have to. If you're gonna stick one of these guys or even both of these guys, you got to stick it and live with it, because
don't look back.
Jason's like whatever you do, don't stick that. Don't do that. There's other things.
Don't stick it. Probably is the right answer.
Yeah, exactly.
Wide receiver. So some of these are quick. Jamar Chase is still on the team. He's not getting his contract extension. I don't think it matters.
Real upset about it. Big mad.
He's going to be big mad, and he's going to show up and play football anyway. That's going to be the theme with this team, by the way, because I believe I mentioned pathologically cheap. That's the Bengals. That's always been the Bengals, and it will continue to be the Bengals as long as they are owned by the people that own them. Pathologically cheap. That's how it is. That's always been the Bengals. They don't have any money. The guy who owns the team doesn't have the money that other NFL owners have, and he ain't going to spend the money to do this. So they always have issues when they have really good players keeping them long term because they don't want to pay for the second contracts. And they've been for years saying we want to keep both Jamar and T and pay Joe. And it's like, I don't know how you're going to do that, bro. And they're like, we'll figure it out. And then now we're finally approaching it, and they are not really successfully figuring it out. They're kind of just kicking the can down the road. So it's like, okay, whatever. Jamar Chase opens as the wide receiver 5, translates to 6 overall. His ADP is 4. The analysis here is that Jamar Chase is good at football. Do we need to discuss this, or can we just move on?
No, I mean, we can put a highlight. So for all disclosure, our guy Mike Berlin was supposed to be here tonight. He had a couple of issues. So he did send us some of his notes here, though, that I did want to touch on a little bit. So Mike makes some notes about how 14 of the 15 top 5 finishers over the last 3 years, they're at 30% or higher in the slot percentage. Chase was quite a bit under that, which is an interesting aspect that we can look at. I actually wrote a piece this summer about highest targeted receivers per situation, whether that be like on third down or whether that be like from the slot or out wide or whatever. And something I found that was actually super interesting is that while Chase's slot snaps have stayed fairly consistent at just over about 200, he's seeing a higher total share of his snaps year to year in the slot. So from about 16% in 2021 to about 24.5% in 2023, which is a sizable jump. And while that comes from his outside snaps coming down and just the offensive in general not having quite as many snaps as they had in 2021, it does raise a good point that last season, 33.8% target rate for Jamar Chase when lined up in the slot. The only player higher was Tyreek Hill. That is impressive. And when you put that into perspective with Jamar Chase's ability to get balls after the catch, I know that we're talking about a guy who is going in the first round, who is wide receiver 5. But I think if you were to take this guy, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, whatever, I think you do have room to stand on and ground to stand on. So personally, I mean, yes, obviously the obvious answer to answer your question, Neil, yes, Jamar Chase is very good at football and he might even get better next season.
Anything to add to that, Jason? I think he summed it up.
Yeah,
that really is the argument for Jamar Chase. Is it's about as good as it gets. All right. So then
arguing Jamar Chase is good. I'm gonna go out on a limb on that one, you guys. For sure.
I mean, I think I think he's a tier 1 wide receiver, so it doesn't really matter.
Controversial. The hard-hitting topics.
Hard-hitting analysis.
The other elephant in the room is T. Higgins is going to play out on the franchise tag. They weren't able to get a deal done. Mason, you wrote it here. 2 words, contract year. And I was going to phrase it a little bit differently. The only thing that can derail T. Higgins is if he gets hurt again. So draft with confidence. He's healthy right now. If he doesn't get hurt again, contract year, he's trying to get paid. He wants the Michael Pittman deal, which was 3 years, $70 million. And they don't want to give him that, apparently. Apparently, they're not close to that, which is really sad. I just want to point out that that's really sad.
It shouldn't be unreachable.
No, that's not an unreasonable number. He's not even asking for true wide receiver 1 money. He wants high-end wide receiver 2 money. So the reality of it is that I think this relationship is over. And he's going to play out this year. And when they sit down, I guarantee you he's not going to say, I want 3 or $70 million. He's going to say, no, I want $100 million now because you've been jerking me around. And now I put up another good year for you. And I guarantee you, if he gets out that door, someone's going to give him the $100 million. Yeah, there you go. That guy with his Charger shirt. That might happen. I could see that. Sure, I could name a couple other situations where it's like there'd be a bunch of teams that are like, he wants 100 million to come be our wide receiver. Here you go.
Here you go.
Here's
You know what's
three.
funny is that
Yeah.
Jason and I got into a bidding war this offseason over T. Higgins at about $100 million. So like,
it's
I mean,
it's like you want me to pick what you. I'll send an Uber Black. Here, I'll pick you up at the airport. Like, yeah, like, we'll get a limo. Here, that's fine. Like, it's not a lot of money. I know that's weird, like to say that, but in NFL terms, it's not that much money.
Yeah.
So it's real. That's what I mean about the Bengals being cheap. It's really sad that you can't come up with 3 years, $70 million.
And at the same point, you get out of Ohio. Like,
as someone
that's
who
the
lived in
real big
Ohio
selling
for
point.
9 years and then got out of Ohio, you should do that. I've done it. I lived in Ohio for 9 years. True story, up and down the state. And then I moved away. It was great. It was the right choice. Don't at me. Don't at me on Twitter. I don't want to hear from you about that take, because I'm objectively correct.
Yeah. Part of the reason me and Mason got into it is because I'm like looking ahead. I know Higgins is going to be on a much better team next
that's what
year.
I'm saying.
Yeah, there's a very
As
high
the wide
bar, though.
receiver one.
We were not, just for full disclosure, Jason, we were not bidding on this season's
No.
T. Higgins. I mean, while we're going to get that T. Higgins, we were betting on next season. Wherever he goes, he's going to go absolutely ballistic.
Oh, no, it'll be the T. Higgins revenge tour.
Oh,
I
yeah.
hope there's a sick part of me that hopes he winds up like in the division.
Baltimore.
Yeah, Baltimore would be amazing. Like, or even the Browns. Like, I know they just restructured Amari Cooper, but like they get rid of Amari Cooper, bring in T. Higgins, and it's just twice a year I get to watch them just eat it. It would be fantastic.
The entire division needs a receiver, and they're like, okay,
100 million?
Take out.
Sure, like I got that. Like, but, we'll go take out a loan. It's fine. It's just really sad. So T. Higgins, draft with confidence. I know last year is going to make people gun shy. Don't be scared. In fact, I'm expecting classic T. Higgins, not 2023 T. Higgins. All right, wide receiver.
Just project him for 14 games, you're fine. Like,
yeah, I was gonna, even if he misses 3 games, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Because he's opening at wide receiver 27, which would translate to 50 overall. So late fourth, early fifth round, and his ADP is 45. Yeah, I'm good with it. Fine with me. It's like right where you want to be for top end wide receiver too. So I got no issue with that. Last player at wide receiver. And this is an interesting player. What's that?
This is one of the most important values.
This is an interesting conversation a little bit. It's Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton, rookie wide receiver. He's coming into the Tyler Boyd role. Tyler Boyd is now in Tennessee. Opens at wide receiver 75. Translates to 190 overall. However, Jason, the cat's out of the bag, and his ADP is already at 148, and it's July 25th. So go ahead, do your Jermaine Burton value pitch if you want, but I got to tell you, that train is leaving the station.
I mean, even if he gets up into, I'm okay taking him as high as round 7. Like, I'm willing to move way up because
now we're going to play a name game when you're done, but keep going. No.
The reason being is, you know where Tyler Boyd ended up last year? End of year, wide receiver, 48.
I don't think it's that easy to paint by numbers.
It's just because at the same point, he is going to be in that role, which works out great. I mean, you're not the top one. You don't have the toughest matchup. If Burrow is healthy and is finding you, it's going to work out even better because you have 2 guys that could easily get covered, and then you have Burton underneath, and it just rotates. It all depends on where you're going. And like we kind of touched on, we're not sure how the running back room is going to work out. And with that in mind, Burton kind of just comes in as an additional weapon that you're going to have to throw to because you're not going to be able to trust either running back. So I'm really high on Burton. If you haven't noticed,
I can tell.
He might be my highest rated.
Mason gave you the actual side eye on that one.
Yeah, I wasn't super high. I'll be honest. I wasn't terribly high on Jermaine Burton in the pre-draft process. I'll just say that I had a few issues that we don't really have to hash in too much because the thing's all said and done. I don't know if he's a cut and dry fit for their slot, though. I will say that he doesn't have the experience that much experience in the slot, but he has a little bit. I guess we'll see. I mean, it could be a potentially high value pick. And I can see where Jason is leaning in terms of like, you guys have to like defenses have to cover Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. So
Yes.
like somebody is going to leak open, and
Burton will be single covered
if they
a
can
lot,
find if they
and,
can
and
find
possibly
him,
by a linebacker.
if they can find him good, I think if I were running their system, if I were put in their position, and trust me, I'm a lizard-brained human being to be calling the Bengals offense. So,
For those who are playing along at home, you'll notice that Mason's Twitter handle is @PFF Mace, and that's not something that you can just do. So he does work for Pro Football Focus.
The way that when I would approach the way that I would be using these tools in my offense is that Jamar Chase is seeing a metric ton of snaps in the slot. He's the most experienced out of anybody that's going to see those. He's very, very effective out of the slot, as we just alluded to earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at Jermaine Burton has a little bit more of a skill set that you see from some of these guys that maybe eventually you could probably teach him more slot play. He had, like, when I was just looking through here in his snaps, he had about 100 snaps out of the slot last season, about 200 the season before, about 75 the season before. So over his college career, about a third of his snaps came from the slot. That's not a huge metric when he's seeing over 1,500 outside. So 1,500 snaps outside, he's got that experience. He's going to be comfortable. If they can get him into some looks that get him stacking guys and running dudes off while everybody's really worried, while the safety's eyeing whatever T's doing, while the safeties are trying to bracket whatever Jamar's doing down there in the slot, I think you could have a couple of really nice little deep balls. Maybe it's a play for best ball, a sneaky little play for best ball. You never know, but I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. Now, to preface that, I also will say that I think the 7th round is a bit rich. I will say that.
So here's how we're gonna play that particular comment, because you've now bought yourself this segment of the show, because I wasn't gonna do this, but now we're doing it. Jermaine Burton or Curtis Samuel.
Oh
yeah, I'm going right for the jugular. I don't care. Your 7th round comment has now bought you this, and I'm gonna make it unpleasant.
It depends on what my build is.
No.
Yes,
No.
because
answer the question.
If I want consistency,
he's gonna lawyer his way out of it, Mason.
Well, yeah, the reason I want
he's
consistency.
smart.
Yeah, see, Mason knows.
He's
consistency.
Smart.
I'm probably going to go with Burton because I think that the value's there. If I'm going for upside, it's Samuel because I know he's going to be used more. He should theoretically, like I said, I have him as my wide receiver 1 for the Bills. So
that's such a politician answer. So, in the 7th round, which one are you taking?
It depends on what I've picked before.
All right, that was.
It's a real coin flip for me because
that's not a ringing
endorsement.
Name
off the next 3 in line around.
Josh Palmer. That's the next one.
Yeah, man.
Oh, I told you this is not going to be pleasant. I'm doing this deliberately. I know his rankings. I'm doing this.
Well,
I'm doing this in the most dick way possible.
Neil grabbed the fork and he went, "Give me your picks."
I know what I'm doing.
It's probably going to be Palmer there, though.
Okay. I'm just trying to gauge, like, for the help of the listening audience at home.
I posted it. Palmer is in my top 12 at wide receiver. So
I know. That's why we're doing this, though. Okay. What was the other one that JSN.
It's probably going to be Burton.
Really?
That again, I like Geno, but I really think that the until we see it, where Lockett's still there, I don't think the whole lot's going to change. So I expect there to be a step up for JSN, but I just think that Burton has so much more upside in comparison because of the offense he's on.
Okay,
so,
I'm gonna do one more because we do have to move on. So my last one will be. I changed it at the last second. So I'm trying to think of like one more really good one. Brandon Cooks.
It's Burton.
Okay, that one would have been funnier like 2 years ago.
Yeah,
but
I was real high on Cooks.
The reason why I'm doing that, Mason, is because for the listening audience at home, I'm listing things that are by consensus, like 7th round picks. Whereas Jermaine Burton, if you're listening to Jason, the good news is you don't have to take Burton in the 7th round.
Yeah.
You can get Burton in the 14th round, which is
For
where
now.
I would be comfortable taking him.
For now.
Yeah, probably not going to move too much more. He already moved up like 45 total places. I don't think he's going to move up. Training
to be
camp
fair,
is a
he
weird
moved up
thing.
he moved up from like
190.
don't bother to take a shot. Like that's essentially what he moved up to.
He's moved up to last player on your team before you get a defense and kicker, basically, like right in that neighborhood. And could he move up more? Maybe. We'll have to see what happens in the preseason. Jason's very high on him. I think Mason, our expectations are a little more properly calibrated, where I'm not saying don't take him, because there could be something there for you, but I'm waiting till the end of the draft. I'm not willing to take him that high.
So like I kind of touched on the fact that Boyd's gone. Last year was Boyd's probably worst year with the Chase and Higgins. And he finished as wide receiver 49 in PPR. So the 3 years prior to that, he was 31, 30, and 29. So I would also say that's compared to his
team was constructed differently a little bit at that point, but sure.
So with that in mind, like if Burton's even in that range at that value, that's you're getting a flex that's
put a pin in that thought because I'm going to add to it. Tight end is Mike Gesicki this year. We've seen over the years that what the Bengals do at tight end is they go and get an aging veteran, pay him nothing, and then see if they can turn it into something. And what's hilarious is it has worked numerous times. The people that come and do this job, they get contracts afterwards. Hayden Hurst got a contract after what he did in Cincinnati. I have other examples, but that's the most recent one. Like, they've been doing this. They take an old guy, bring him in. Joe Burrow needs a safety blanket. That's one of the things about Joe Burrow. He always needs a big tight end that can work the middle of the field, block a little bit, and that's part of it. Got to be able to block a little bit. And this is why I don't like this one as much. Because Mike Gesicki has proven very clearly over the years that he cannot block at all. There is not an ounce of blocking in this man. He cannot block. He cannot do half the job of a tight end. He is a pretty good receiver, but he's got too much in the way of drops for me. I've never liked Mike Gesicki, ever. I am not a Mike Gesicki guy. I never have been, and so I'm at odds with myself. I look at historical data that tells me that this system works. They get an old veteran tight end, and that person has a really good season because of Joe Burrow, and then they leave and get a real contract and then fall off the face of the earth. That is the literal pattern for the last 3 years that we watch. And now we get to Mike Gesicki, and they're going to try it again. And this is the one where I'm like, I feel like Larry David in that meme where I'm like, just like, I don't know. Like, two things in my mind are conflicting. I value the role, and I've seen it be successful, this role, with different people who all then get contracts and then fail. And then I have to also lump in my disgust with Mike Gesicki. So I just can't get it to go into my head. And everybody else seems to be confused as well. Because Mike Gesicki, the public is, here's the thing. Everybody is finally caught up to where I started, which is where we're just done with Mike Gesicki. And I'm like, thanks for listening to me a couple years ago, guys. Like, this could have saved you a lot of grief. Gesicki opens at tight end 28, 230 would be 233 overall. His ADP is 214. I just want to point out that's well outside of draftable range. So I only wrote those numbers mostly to throw salt at Mike Gesicki. But it's outside of draftable range. It's a messed up situation. So I go back to what we were discussing with Burton. The early camp reports are that Mike Gesicki is killing it at training camp and that Joe Burrow is going to him early and often, and they're developing a connection. I always tell people this is lying season. Don't listen to anything anybody tells you right now because it's a lot of lies. But with this, I don't know. So here's my question.
I mean, it might not be lies. Like, people go to camp, they see him throwing to Mike Gesicki. The issue is that you're putting weight on 25 practice reps in the middle of July. Like, so much
the issue
more.
Is, does that do anything?
Somebody who's new.
The question I
Yeah.
have for Jason is, does
You're
that do
literally trying
anything to the
they're
Burton
trying
thing?
to expedite his ability to understand the offense, and if you give him looks, he can understand his role within the offense. So I don't necessarily see it as like he's going to now get all of this work because of that. I think that they're like, hey, we need a non-net negative at this position, and we have to do something to get you there.
And our only other tight end is Drew Sample.
Yeah, so like
Who can block?
Yeah.
Who can block? I will say that's what he's there to do. He can block. That's all he does, but he can do it. Jason, does the Gesicki thing mess with the Burton thing? Was where I was going there in your mind? I think I know what Mason would say based on his original analysis
Yes
about
and
how
no.
we don't know Burton's even going to be anywhere near the slot anyway.
Yeah, but it's yes and no just because of the fact that you're looking at his successful being like we've touched on with these tight ends who are good at block or are flashes in the pan. They're the veterans that are coming in. They're able to kind of block. So he had a lot of success with Hayden Hurst. He had a lot of success with CJ Uzama, like older guys that can block as a tight end. With Gesicki, I don't know now. I mean, if it's really up in the air, but I would still guess that he's going to see more targets because once Joe Burrow is actually in trouble and realizes that he has broom hands and won't be able to catch anything, like there's no hope. So it's going to go to
Broom
Burton.
hands is not a turn of phrase. I think you mean stone hands, but
I like broom hands. I think it was good too.
Broom hands is.
If you tried to, I imagine if you taped brooms to your hands and tried to catch them,
It probably would be pretty hard.
Yeah, right. That wouldn't be easy.
Jason reinvents the English language as he goes.
It's how I work. No.
Mason, what do you think? No one's going to advocate drafting Mike Gesicki, right? I'm just bringing it up because it is just something to note. It could be something on the waiver wire at some point. It's just something to note.
Like this is my whole thing. I mean, you guys, we talk about this all the time. If you can talk to your commissioner, just abolish the tight end. We don't care about the tight end anymore. But I'm with Jason from a pure I can speak words from a pure football standpoint. It's very, very hard for coordinators to get what's the nicest way to say this? Middling receivers at tight end on the field that absolutely just cannot block, that are a net negative blocking in the run game. Like we have to get down to the crux. I understand that we have guys like Travis Kelce and, George Kittle is obviously a
George Kittle can block.
Both of them. He can
George
block.
Kittle can block.
But I feel like the receiving ability of tight ends sometimes I feel like overshadows that these guys have to be able to block. I'm not bringing a guy in line that cannot block. I don't care if he runs good routes. I have to be establishing to the defense that I could potentially run it right here to this guy.
Yeah.
But if I can't trust that you can do that, it really falls apart. And that especially falls apart with teams that like to run outside zone. I don't really have Cincinnati's numbers right in front of me. We'll have to look exactly what their percentage of outside zone usage was. But when you have tight ends that cannot move and have trouble blocking, your outside zone gets literally blown up into smithereens. You have no options there because guys get pressed into the backfield and then your back has nowhere to read because he can't read his keys. So It makes it difficult for effectively anybody if you just have guys on the field that can't block. So I would go other directions. We talk about it all the time. You have to have a tight end. It's unfortunate, but take your shot elsewhere, in my opinion.
On the same team, Drew Sample. We touched on him. He's going to be on the field more than Gesicki is.
But the problem is they don't throw to Drew Sample because Drew Sample is has the top speed of like a barge. It's really not good. Like Drew Sample might be one of the slowest people I've ever seen. Like it's like watching a building try to run.
I don't need him to run fast. I need him to run strong for 3 yards and push that guy back.
Turn around. That's what Hayden Hurst was doing. Was I need you to run 3 yards and turn around. And that's literally Hayden Hurst. It's his only route was run 3 to 4 yards up the field, turn around, and the ball's going to be right there, and just catch it and fall down.
Outlet to you.
Exactly. And then just catch it and just fall over. I don't even need you to run after you catch it. Just fall over. Just fall over. We got the 4 yards we needed. Now we're on to second down. It's fine. Like, I'll take 3-4 yards at a chunk if I can get them. Like, so it's we all agree. The only thing that we might slightly disagree on is our varying degrees of love for Jermaine Burton. But other than that, that's your Bengals for 2024. The Bengals are trying to be a playoff team. Good luck with that. To be perfectly honest with you, the only things I'm really excited about on this team are Jamar Chase and T. Higgins. The rest of it, I'm kind of willing to just let somebody else deal with, if I can. I'm okay. I'm in on the 2 receivers, the top 2, and the rest of it, I'm good. Final thoughts, gentlemen.
He wants to say Zach Moss season so bad. I know it.
I'm trying to bait him into it. We're wrapping up the show. I'm trying to bait him into it. He's not going to take the bait. He's learned over the years that he knows what I'm trying to set him up. Because then I'm going to clip it later. Like, we're going to clip it later and play it as a short. Like, it's so we're not going to get it. Okay,
not happening.
All right,
Burton maybe.
Fine. No. I'm not. We'll let the AI algorithm clip that later. That'll be fine. All right, gentlemen, it's been an absolute pleasure. And in the listening audience's world, depending on how these got loaded in the system, you might be watching the Cleveland Browns, or you might be watching the Dallas Cowboys. Stay tuned. I'm not the one loading them in the system this year, so I don't know how they're going to get loaded in, but it's going to be one of those two. So if it is the Browns, good luck with that. That's a highly entertaining show that may or may not have already been recorded. And if it is the Cowboys, hold your nose. Just hold your nose. We're gonna plow through it. That's what we're gonna do. So with that, we will see you tomorrow. But until then, keep up the nonsense.
I'm Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, and you can find all the guys at ImportantNonsense.com. Kaboom!